You don't want to get a wheelchair because you don't want people to think that you're handicapped. Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about wheelchairs, and specifically I want to talk about when I knew it was the right time for me to get a wheelchair and sort of how I felt about making that transition in my mind to getting a wheelchair. I have spina bifida and I am a part-time wheelchair user. I do have the ability to walk. Lately not very well and not very far. From the time I was about, say, 15 until the time I was about 35, I don't think that I ever used a wheelchair more than maybe once or twice. My mobility decline caused me to get AFOs again, ankle foot orthotics, and they helped for a couple of years. It seemed to kind of level things off, and I was able to get around a bit better with the AFO. And then, but as my mobility kind of kept declining, the AFOs weren't, and not that they weren't helping, but they weren't really a great solution. I just didn't want to walk anymore.
And where are your AFOs now?
So my AFOs now are sitting in the closet at home.
And does your wife love that?
And my wife is not happy about that. But there are some reasons. I do have footwear challenges. That is a whole other video probably. Footwear is a nightmare for me.
So is it typical for people's mobility to decline when they have spina bifida?
Yeah, I think spina bifida, there's such a broad spectrum of people with spina bifida, but I do think, in my mind, I've kind of had it in the back of my mind for a long time, that, you know, as I age, I will probably need to use a mobility device. People with spina bifida do kind of age faster than average. The way that we walk causes a lot of stress on our joints and bones and muscles and things like that, and so it's kind of been in the back of my mind, you know, forever that I would eventually get to this point.
I would imagine too it's probably cyclical, because the less you move, the more difficult it is to move.
Yeah, and really she's talking about my rotundness, my growth in my girth.
And that should be another topic for another video.
Totally other video.
Weight loss.
Weight loss, yes. Yeah, that is true. Like, you know, it is a dangerous cycle. You start to move less, and as you move less, you start to put on weight, and maybe you feel a little bit depressed about moving less, and you medicate with some ketchup chips.
Gross.
Delicious. Or Cool Ranch Doritos.
Also gross.
And then you end up with a few extra pounds, and then that compounds the problem of being able to walk well.
And really, I don't think that's an issue for people just with spina bifida. It is for anyone as they age. It's just it's more difficult for you to get exercise in a typical manner.
Yes, that is true. As ironic as this conversation is, we are literally pulling into the taco truck right now. We drive about 30 minutes to this small town, and we get tacos at Greta's Taco Wagon. And
there's a large Mexican Mennonite population, so...
Yeah. So we're at Greta's Taco Wagon, so we're going to take a bit of a break here and eat some tacos.
Tacos! Oh.
It is busy.
Oh, and ice cream, but we're not getting ice cream today.
Even though I knew that eventually I would need to use a wheelchair, I still hadn't given it a lot of thought, because all I was doing was just excluding myself from things that I would have liked to do and just couldn't because of not being able to walk far enough. So I stopped shopping. I stopped going to the mall. We used to tailor our vacations around, going to things where I wouldn't have to walk. We'd do a lot of driving, not a lot of getting out of the car. And there was just a lot of things that I was missing out on. And so it was a bit of a mental leap to just start to think through, what is the cost to me not starting to use a wheelchair? I'm missing out on a lot more than if I would just sit in a wheelchair and use it. I would be able to partake of a lot more fun things that we were doing. So there's a quote that says, "Change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change." And that was something that I sort of had to come to terms with. Staying the same meant that I was going to miss out on all kinds of things. I was going to miss out on vacations. I was going to miss out on everyday life, like shopping, or going to an outdoor event, or going to a July 1st fireworks.
Going to church.
Going to church, even. There were all these things that I was going to miss out on if I just decided to stay the same. And so it became quite painful to stay the same, and so change kind of happened. I made the mental leap to, okay, I'm gonna investigate a wheelchair, and we're gonna see how this goes. Part of that pain of staying the same, which became really problematic, was because I'm married. There's a lot of things that Joy was having to do without me,
or just didn't do,
or we just didn't do them at all. Things that we just totally avoided because I couldn't do them.
There was things that I wanted to do that I didn't feel like I could. Even as simple as going for a walk on a nice day, because he couldn't, and that was starting to become really disappointing for me.
Yeah, that's something that we sort of need to talk about. Is this whole discussion has many facets. It's just not all about you. And if you're deciding between, making that mental leap to needing to use a wheelchair, it affects other people around you. And although you might see it as this resignation that you're disabled or whatever, it probably allows people around you to have more freedom than if you just sort of, for lack of a better term, limped along and tried to make do without it. There were a number of vacations that we went on, and now when I look back through the pictures and we watch videos of those places that we've been, I realized there was so much that we missed. We looked out the window at all of these things. We drove through a lot of places. We pulled up to the parking lot of these places, and we just never got out. And now when I look back on it, I think I've got a whole list of places I'd like to return to, because we just didn't see everything that we wanted to see. If I'd had my wheelchair, it would have been kind of a game changer. And so part of me, even though I don't really live in regret, that's a whole other conversation, I don't really regret it, but I do think that had I gotten a wheelchair sooner, some of those vacation experiences would have been more enjoyable, especially even for Joy, because there were times when I would park myself on a bench, and then she would go off and see the sight that I couldn't see, or the thing, or the whatever it was. She was seeing it without me, and I was just sitting on a bench somewhere waiting for her to come back. Let's talk about the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue is pride. You don't want to get a wheelchair because you don't want people to think that you're handicapped. And I get it. Like, as soon as you sit down in that chair, people do look at you differently. They treat you differently. And that's part of the reason why I have this channel, is to prove to people that people who use a wheelchair or other mobility device are no different than anyone else. But I will say, the freedom that it gives me now to be able to get out and we, go for a walk around a park, or we go to, to a tourist attraction, or to the grocery store. I love grocery shopping. Like, I used to own a grocery store. Maybe I'll make a video about that sometime. I used to own a very small grocery store. I love grocery stores. When I go, it takes us a long time to shop because I like to look at a lot of things, but I enjoy going. And those were things I was missing out on. I probably went, I'm going to say 3 years without setting foot in a grocery store, without setting foot in Walmart. Not that you're missing anything there, but even the mall. I enjoy going to the mall. I like, there's lots of people around, there's lots of things to look at, And those were things that I just missed out on in that period where I was too stubborn to admit that I needed to use a wheelchair. So once I sort of got my mind around the wheelchair idea, the first step really was to just get any wheelchair. There was something that we were going to. It was a car show that I really wanted to go to, and there was no way that I was going to be able to walk around the entire car show. And so we got a wheelchair, which I like to call the old lady wheelchair. It was your standard old school, like, hospital wheelchair. And that actually worked for us probably for I would say a year and a half to 2 years.
But did it? It didn't. Because you couldn't propel yourself. I had to push you because there were arms in the way and you...
Yeah, and it had plastic wheels. It was meant for, pushing a patient around a nursing home or a hospital. And so it was all right in a place like a mall. But once you got outdoors, it was terrible. There's a few vacations that we went, a few places that we went, and Joy had, she got quite a workout pushing me around in that thing. We knew we kind of needed to take this thing to the next level. And so the next level would be to acquire a custom built chair that made more sense for me. So here in Ontario, Canada, where we live, there's a bit of a process to getting approved for funding for a, more of a custom made wheelchair. And I won't get into all the details of that in this video. I'll do it in another video. But needless to say, there was a process to finally get to the point where we could get that chair, and it was a lot of money. Like, we had to spend, again, there's a whole funding formula for that, but out of pocket, it was still many thousands of dollars. So I'm gonna do a whole video next week. Next week, Joy? Are we gonna commit to that?
Sure.
Next week, we are gonna do an entire video on why I chose the wheelchair that I did and give you a bit of a review of it, because I did a lot of research ahead of time and looking at the funding that I had and the type of chair that they were willing to provide some funding on and how it would meet my needs. And so we ended up with a very specific chair, which I want to talk to you about next week.